We're going to talk to Molly Kingsley shortly, co-founder of UsForThem. Matt Hancock was up in the COVID inquiry yesterday. I watched some of it with interest at various points of the day. Let's have a look at him talking this morning, rather yesterday, about how sorry he is.
I am profoundly sorry for the impact that had. I'm profoundly sorry for each death that has occurred. And I also understand why, for some, it will be hard to take that apology from me. I understand that. I get it. But it is honest and heartfelt, and I'm not very good at talking about my emotions and how I feel.
Yeah, he's not very good at talking about his emotions or how he feels. You might remember him crying on television. You might remember him talking about his emotions and how he felt when he was in the jungle. You might remember him talking about his emotions and how he felt when he was talking to Isabel Oakeshott. You might even remember when he talks about his emotions in Parliament and how he felt. I'm not sure I believe a word Matt Hancock says. Let's talk to Molly Kingsley. Molly, that's all right then, apparently. Matt's sorry. Morning.
Good morning, Mike. No, I don't believe a word he says either. I think it is despicable. You know, this is a man that had us all under house arrest on and off for the best part of 2 years whilst he was having an affair, not obeying his own rules.
Yeah.
Like, is he profoundly sorry for that? Because I didn't hear that bit of the apology.
No, I missed that bit as well. But this is the other thing that, you know, the actual meat and drink, and I know you were tweeting about this yesterday, is that not only was his planning completely wrong, not only was his knowledge completely sort of missing, not only did he say that he was told something, therefore he believed it. You wonder what the calibre of people is at the top of our government to be able to be running something like this. He asked Helen Whately, you know, how's it all going in the social care area? And she said, well, not very well. We've only got 2 plans and I've only seen one of them. And you're kind of going, well, you sort of basically locked down the economy based on nothing.
Yeah, it's really disappointing. I mean, I think his attempt to throw his civil servants under the bus was, and I've already used the word despicable, so, you know, abhorrent, let's say. It was very transparent and conspicuous. So it was a complete failure yesterday to, I mean, he said sorry, but actually he didn't offer any meaningful apology for the handling of the pandemic and the decisions that, you know, we know, because the evidence, he seems to be forgetting that the evidence is in the public domain. You know, we have 1 million of his private WhatsApps that we have all read and digested. And I think many of us will have felt profoundly shocked, actually, about the lack of due process, the lack of basic morals, the lack of consideration, the lack of respect shown for the British public in those WhatsApps. Right. So, you know, he can say sorry in the kind of very oblique way he said yesterday, but I didn't hear anything by way of a meaningful apology or recognition, actually. No,
and I didn't see absolutely all of it, but I didn't see hard questioning coming his way particularly either, because I think I would have said to him, you know, in this WhatsApp message, when you said, should we be able to scare the pants off people for the next one that's coming along down the track, I didn't hear anyone asking me about that, because I'd like to have heard his answer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge question here about the lack of due process and the lack of ethics there is. It may be that the inquiry comes onto that in Module 2, let's be fair. However, I felt the same as you, Mike. I mean, I came away listening, I listened to most of yesterday, and I was deeply troubled by the line of questioning as much as Hancock. You know, Hancock will be Hancock. I think we know and expect that now. But actually what I think was the most troubling element of yesterday, and actually the inquiry so far, is that Hugo Keith, the KC for the inquiry, appears to really have drunk the Hancock Kool-Aid in a way, that actually the issue here was not the fact we had lockdowns. It wasn't the fact that we stopped the education of 10 million children and that we deprived dying relatives visit with loved ones. The issue here was that we didn't do that sooner, quicker, harder. And actually, if you listen to the line of questioning, you know, the KC is critical on those grounds. And I think that just sets us up for a deeply troubling precedent in terms of what this inquiry is going to say.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look at another clip, because he appears to have only drawn one conclusion so far from his studying of what went wrong.
We've got to be ready to hit a pandemic hard, that we've got to be able to take action, lockdown action if necessary, that is wider, earlier, more stringent than feels comfortable at the time. And the failure to plan for that was a much bigger flaw in the strategy than the fact that it was targeted at the wrong disease.
So, in his view, we should have done it earlier, we should have done it for longer perhaps, and that's what we should do next time.
I mean, I don't know if he realises this, but he's making a declaration there that is fundamentally inconsistent with some pretty fundamental human rights. You know, I don't know how he has got comfortable that that is proportionate, reasonable, rational, you know, all these things that until 2020 we thought executive action needed to be. That certainly isn't. There's obviously a huge question about how what he's describing is consistent with childhood, children's education, children's welfare. You know, I think you can have this conversation about stopping the virus, but on contact with reality, the idea that this is a non-harmful cause of action just evaporates. I mean, we've seen the carnage that it's reaped across childhood. In fact, we now have reports, as you know, we don't need reports to tell us. There's now a really damning report came out from UCL earlier this week saying exactly this, that lockdowns and school closures are a disaster for children, that children were forgotten. So, you know, I would like to see how he can reconcile what he's proposing, with morality, with law, with childhood, with child welfare. Yeah,
exactly right. I mean, the one thing that did ring kind of true to me was when he said that there was this sort of almost sort of obsession with the worst case scenario where there would be bodies in the street and they wouldn't have enough body bags and they wouldn't have enough places to bury dead bodies. And I wonder whether that did distract them, because if you look at something through that kind of lens, everything else seems unimportant, doesn't it? If you actually do believe or convince everybody that there's going to be literally 10,000 people dropping dead in the street every day, that's the only thing you care about. So I wonder whether that was a deliberate kind of nudge by somebody to make them pay attention to you know, that over there instead of what was actually going on.
Well, when you look at the modelling, I mean, we know now that the Neil Ferguson modelling was grossly inaccurate.
Yeah.
There is a very interesting question about the assumptions behind that modelling. So, you know, we know that they effectively SAGE were only asked to model worst case scenarios. Why? You know, who at whose direction?
Yeah.
The minister's direction? And I think there's some very significant unanswered questions here. I mean, when you see Hancock use terminology like "let's frighten the pants off everyone," it's hard to buy a narrative that he was somehow hoodwinked. I mean, that looks like a deliberate strategy to stoke up fear. I do agree, though, that having stoked up that fear, they left themselves with a huge problem, because they did frighten the pants off everybody. And I think what they found is once they'd done that, actually reining that level of fear back in was almost impossible.
It really does seem an extraordinary state of affairs that I just find myself asking the question, how did these people get into government?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and how do we get them out? I think absolutely the quality, and there are a few exceptions, you know, there have been a few good men and women in this period, but they have been very few and far between. And actually this reeks. And it, you know, Hancock's statement yesterday, I mean, it is such staggering arrogance. And you know, you can probably tell I'm quite shocked by it, actually, because I think when we first started talking about the inquiry, I think you and I thought, Mike, that it was going to be a whitewash. I think it's actually worse than that. I think this is dangerous. You know, we are at risk of setting up a really, really dangerous precedent here. And I just don't understand how it's, I mean, you know, I do come at it particularly from a point of view of a child lens, but actually for all of us, you know, how are we going to have a functioning economy if we have lockdowns every 3 years?
Well, exactly. And surely the lesson that should be learned from what happened during COVID, and Julie Hartley-Brewer was talking about this morning, the award-winning Julie Hartley-Brewer, was that, you know, actually most people who got COVID didn't die, even people who were supposed to be vulnerable, you know, and I know that there are people who will be very upset when I say that, but it's true. Unfortunately, that is the truth. It's absolutely true. And, you know, so there were large swathes of the population that were never at any real risk, you know, kids, but actually also you might say, you know, young, fit, healthy people under 40 were never at serious risk. And I think we've lost any kind of grasp of that. And the thing, you know, another thing that I found very concerning listening to the inquiry yesterday was that we seem to still be myopically focusing on the virus as a risk. And, you know, to prevent that risk, we must stop the virus in its tracks. And that was as much the KC as it was Hancock.
And you think, well, actually, if we really were concerned about preventing illness and death, because that has to be the ultimate goal here, well, there's much more we can do. It's not just about the virus, is it? It's about increasing societal resilience, NHS resilience, but also our own resilience. And we all have a personal responsibility towards that. So, had we been a healthier, fitter nation, then this would have been a far less deadly virus, even to the cohort that were susceptible to serious illness. But I heard none of that conversation yesterday, and I don't think we're going to hear that conversation.
No. Well, we shall wait with bated breath. Molly, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Molly Kingsley, co-founder of UsForThem, on the disappointment felt, generally speaking, around the country. I suppose we shouldn't have expected anything better from Matt Hancock, but it really was quite a self-serving, self-promotional appearance, as ever, as you would expect. From good old Matt. I don't like to share my emotional feelings because I don't like to talk about them very much, apart from all the time.